2016 was a phenomenal year for the UFC. The sport finally broke into New York for the first time, we saw the first ever fighter to hold two titles simultaneously, and in general, it featured some of the most exciting moments in the history of the company. Just off the top of my head, I can name several great fights that occurred in 2016. 2017 HASNT exactly followed up. Especially the beginning of the year was quite rough for the UFC, as UFC 208 and 209 didn't live up to the expectations. And while you can say that things have turned around since, it's still difficult to compare this year to the previous. But don't write off 2017 just yet, because the real excitement is just beginning. Yes, I realize that it's almost November and there are only 3 PPVs left in the year. But it's not about the quantity of the PPVs, it's about quality. These last 2 months of 2017 has a schedule as good as any 2 months in the past. Let's start off with next week. Georges St-Pierre will finally make his long-awaited return to give his best effort at capturing the middleweight title from Michael Bisping, and Cody Garbrandt will make his first title defense in almost a year against his old friend yet bitter enemy, TJ Dillashaw. Not to forget the third title fight on the card, which makes Joanna Jędrzejczyk's attempt at 6th title defense and improving her record to 150 against Rose Namajunas. We can talk about the card without the title fights and it is just as good, as it features some incredible fights like Stephen Thompson vs Jorge Masvidal, Mickey Gall vs Randy Brown, and Ovince St. Preux vs Corey Anderson, just to name a few. Then the calendar moves to UFC Fight Night Poirier vs Pettis, which also features great fights apart from the main event. Matt Brown will be appearing in the final fight of his long career against Diego Sanchez. Joe Lauzon will be in what is likely to be a fight of the night contender against Clay Guida, and other big names are featured on the card, including Andrei Arlovski and Nate Marquardt. Between this Fight Night card and UFC 218, Anderson Silva will square off against Kelvin Gastelum. The two were previously scheduled to fight at UFC 212, but Gastelum was pulled from the card after testing positive for marijuana. Also, the UFC will crown their first female flyweight champion on Ultimate Fighter Season 26 finale, where the entire show was dedicated to crowning a new flyweight champion alongside the coaching of Eddie Alvarez and Justin Gaethje. Speaking of Alvarez and Gaethje, they have their opportunity to put on a show at UFC 218, a card that will be headlined by Max Holloway defending his newly won featherweight championship for the first time against Frankie Edgar. The card also features a very conspicuous heavyweight bout between former title challenger Alistair Overeem and a rising wrecking machine Francis Ngannou. With Stipe Miocic being on such a tear since winning his championship, this fight will likely determine the next #1 contender. Other big attractions on the card include Henry Cejudo vs Sergio Pettis, Tecia Torres vs Michelle Waterson, and Al Iaquinta vs Paul Felder. Then the month of December just gets better and better. There will be 2 incredible Fight Night cards, one featuring an extremely intriguing fight between Cub Swanson and Brian Ortega, and the other being the possible best Fight Night card in the history of the promotion, at UFC Winnipeg. Swanson gets ready to take on yet another fighter outside of top 10, and seeing how exceptional Ortega looked in his last fight, it should be a barn burner. UFC Winnipeg may as well be a PPV card, as it features so many PPV-deserving bouts. Robbie Lawler and Rafael dos Anjos will fight to try and declare themselves a #1 contender, while the former champion Jose Aldo makes his return for a rematch against Ricardo Lamas. Santiago Ponzinibbio and Mike Perry will both try to climb up the welterweight ladder by fighting each other, and Glover Teixeira makes his return against Misha Cirkunov. If you think now that the rest of the year will be incredible, then just hold your emotions just a bit longer, because it's not quite over yet. UFC 219 will mark the end of the year, and whilst the card is still without a main event, just look at the list of fights currently scheduled for this event. Dominic Cruz vs Jimmy Rivera bantamweight bout, Cynthia Calvillo vs Carla Esparza strawweight bout, Carlos Condit vs Neil Magny welterweight bout, Khalil Rountree Jr. vs Gokhan Saki light heavyweight bout, Kamaru Usman vs Emil Meek welterweight bout, Dan Hooker vs Mark Diakis lightweight bout, Luis Smolka vs Mateus Nicolau flyweight bout. Wow! Could it get any better? And yes, you saw it correctly. The card is still without a main event. If you already wrote off 2017 as a disappointment, you've made a premature decision. Like Tony Ferguson's walkout song's name says, the party has just begun. Dan the Hangman Hooker will make his 8th UFC appearance when he squares off against Englishman Mark Bone Crusher Diakis at UFC 219 in December. The lightweight bout will take place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas on a card where the main event has yet to be announced. It's official at Mark Diakie's United Kingdom heads to UFC 219 in Las Vegas to face Dan Hooker, New Zealand on December 30th. Pic.twitter.com Dix Booker, UFC Europe at UFC Europe October 24, 2017. New Zealand-born Hooker has alternated between wins and losses thus far in his UFC career. However, he is coming off a notable TKO victory over Ross Pearson on home soil earlier this year in Auckland. The fight was Hooker's first in the lightweight division, as all his previous bouts in the UFC had been at featherweight. Hooker looked flawless in his performance against the seasoned veteran Pearson, where he landed a vicious knee to win by KO in round 2. It's no surprise to see the Kiwi stick around 155 pounds and as he goes for back-to-back wins for the first time in the octagon. While Hooker looks for a second consecutive victory, Mark Diakie aims to avoid 2 straight losses. The 24-year-old had his momentum derailed on his last visit to Sin City in July, losing a split decision to Drakkar Klose. He started in the UFC with 3 consecutive wins that included a 30-second first-round KO and a TKO win on his debut in his hometown of Manchester. This time last year, Diakie tends not to waste too much time in the cage, with 6 career wins coming within the first round. Both fighters are notable up-and-coming prospects in their respective countries, and the contest has the potential to be standout on the card. Dan Hooker has great versatility and has a proven record of finishing fights by submission or knockout. While arguably not as well-rounded as Hooker, Diakie will be the more powerful and aggressive of the two and will likely attempt to dictate the pace of the fight. A win for either man will mean a significant step towards the elite top 15 at lightweight, especially on a big stage, that being the UFC's marquee final pay-per-view of the year. UFC Fight Night 119 is approaching this Saturday, and most of the attention is on the main and co-main events. While Derek Brunson vs. Lyoto Machida and Damian Maia vs. Colby Covington are exciting fights, there is another fight on the main card that deserves some attention. Kicking off the main card is a bantamweight matchup between Marlon Vera and 5 John Hands of Stone Lineker. Marlon Vera, who is 10-31 in his professional career, is coming off of an 8-month stretch of 3 wins in the octagon. After defeating Ning Guangyu in November of 2016 by unanimous decision, Chito followed that up with a huge upset win over Brad Pickett in his farewell fight in London. Vera had a quick turnaround and fought again 3 months later in July at UFC on Fox Weidman vs. Gastelum, where he submitted Brian Kelleher in the very first round via armbar. John Lineker, on the other hand, is a different story. His last fight would have elevated him to a title shot with a win, but he ended up with a unanimous decision loss to former champion TJ Dillashaw. He would have truly earned that shot too, before losing at UFC 207. Lineker had won 4 straight fights since moving up to bantamweight. This included wins over names like Rob Font, Michael McDonald, and John Dodson. John Lineker broke his jaw in the first round of his matchup with Dillashaw, but didn't end up needing surgery. He initially intended to return in July but ended up waiting until October to return. John Lineker vs. Marlon Vera is a great matchup to this Fight Night card. Vera has a chance to get another huge win that could propel him into the rankings. Fighting in his opponent's home country is obviously not something that affects him, as he defeated Brad Pickett in England. He has proven in his last 2 fights that he has the skills to get it done with his striking, and also has a great submission game. Vera has a 5-inch height advantage that could really help distance himself from Lineker's power. John Lineker is small for a bantamweight, and this could factor into this matchup. However, he does have 29 professional wins and has shown the ability to take an absolute beatdown and not slow down. Prediction: when the main card kicks off this Saturday, it will be an important fight for the bantamweight division. While Vera offers lengthy striking and a good ground game, I see Lineker's experience and toughness to earn him a victory. John Lineker took some of the biggest shots TJ Dillashaw had to offer and even fought 2 rounds after breaking his jaw. This toughness will allow him to take some shots from Vera, before landing a big one of his own. My prediction: John Lineker by second round KO. Who do you think will have the first victory of the main card this Saturday? MMA Latest spoke to UFC lightweight prospect Super Sage Northcutt ahead of his fight at UFC Norfolk against Michel Quinones on November 11. Northcutt, 82, had not fought since December 2016, when he lost to Mickey Gall at UFC Sacramento by second-round submission. Returning to the lightweight division against Quinones, Super Sage hoped to continue his unbeaten run at 155 pounds. Q. You were supposed to return to the octagon at UFC 214, but your fight was scrapped due to both you and John Makdessi suffering injuries. What was your injury, and how was the recovery? I'm all good, I have recovered from it. And I am ready to fight. I don't really want to talk about the injury, it's something I was dealing with and the UFC knew about it. I was actually supposed to fight Claudio Puelles before Makdessi, but he got injured and had to have surgery. Q. Where have you mainly spent your training camp for this fight? TriStar, Team Alpha Male, or in Texas? The whole entire camp has pretty much been here at Team Alpha Male. I moved up here to Sacramento about 2 months ago, and I've been training specifically with the likes of Uriah Faber. Mr. Faber's been helping me out every single day. The whole team and environment here is incredible, it's like family. Q. Cody Garbrandt, who's now a training partner of yours, is fighting next weekend at UFC 217 as he attempts to defend his 135-pound belt. How's it been training with him? Cody Garbrandt is awesome. I always see him in training and how much effort he puts in. His work ethic is great and he is always pushing himself. He'll be training and he will come help me out, showing me things that I could do better. He's a super cool guy. I've been watching him kill it every single day, so I'm excited to see him fight. Q. Are you going to stick to 155 pounds now, or continue to alternate? Your only losses in MMA have been at welterweight, so what weight class are you going to remain at? Right now I'm going to stick with lightweight. I feel that I'm one of the stronger, bigger and quicker fighters at lightweight. I feel confident at lightweight, but going back to 170 pounds could definitely be a possibility in the future. I walk around very lean. I'm still getting taller, bigger and putting on more muscle mass. Q. It's been over 2 years now since Dana White picked you up on his series Looking for a Fight. Do you sometimes look back and reflect on how much has changed since then? Absolutely. I look back and think, I'm so thankful. It was a blessing that White happened to be there for the fight with Matt Serra and Nick the Tooth. It was a huge blessing that I went out there and won on the night. It all lined up amazing and now I'm here getting ready for my UFC fight in a few weeks. Q. What does 2018 hold for you? Do you hope to fight more than you did this year, and do you think you can break into the lightweight rankings? I definitely plan on fighting more in 2018. This year was a little weird because of injuries, and also having my tonsils taken out. Normally you're a little kid when you have it done, but because of the age I was it took a month to eat solid food. Then you're not able to train, you're not in shape, and that took away a lot of time in which I could have been fought this year.